Hello SKYPIEANs, welcome back to the classroom. Thank you for joining us as always. Today we'll be continuing my review of SKYPIEA from a couple of weeks ago, talking about the tale of Noland the Liar, Great Warrior Kalgara, and the Fire of Shandora. And once again, thank you for joining us as always. So last time I journeyed with the Straw Hat crew, I talked about how I felt about each of their roles in SKYPIEA, and I got to gush about just how much I loved Eneru. So if you missed that video, please go check it out. But now we must travel 400 years into the past to learn how this island in the sky came to be. See how I did that in the beginning of the video? I didn't spend like 70,000 and a half episodes setting up Luffy finally punching this bitch in the head and then shove you into the hot tub time machine. See, when I saw this, I was pissed. Royally pissed. I was like...
This is BBC News from London. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
But then, I did the reasonable thing. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the kitchen. Because it was time to let Oda cook. And I'm calling it now, folks. Write this down, put a date on it, because I am done questioning this man. While this was only a 3-episode arc, which is mini, teeny, tiny, weeny, whiny for One Piece, it painted a beautiful backstory of the land, and got me to think about the Straw Hats' adventure in the clouds in ways I had never considered before. It was like, our beautiful queen is back to life after a quick trip to hell, innit? And I think clouding on a dead monarch whose whole wealth came from sailing around the world, murdering, pillaging, and is the perfect way to get this review started. Not content to only remove us 400 years from everything we know, Oda tries his hand at giving us an actual captain. Like, who's an adult, with a little chestnut on his head. This is Mont Blanc Noland, better known by his honorific of the Liar, but this adventurer came all the way from the North Blue Sea to the island we would later know as Jaya. The Shandorians, however, are not having that shit. Remember that guy who went to North Sentinel Island a few years ago and, like, got riddled to death by arrows? Imagine if they threw a whole fucking anchor at him. The Shandorians are very understandably not welcoming to Noland and his crew. The only people that ever come do what you would expect a crew of colonizers or treasure-hungry pirates to do. But just like how we see the Straw Hats time and time again, Noland and his crew are stark exceptions to this rule. Noland is a botanist by trade, but what he really is a fucking miracle, because tree fever has already begun to ravage the island. However, Noland is unaware that the Shandorians already practice a human sacrifice-based healthcare system, much like we do here in the US. So when he cuts down a giant catfish snake thing, the tribe's people are horrified. Noland doesn't know it, but he just killed a god. One of my favorite things about these 3 episodes is the fact that there's not even a villain here. The main villain is just ignorance.
Ignorance, oh.
Usually in a story like this, we only talk about ignorance one way. The Shandorians are ignorant to the reality of what's killing them. They believe it to be some sort of curse, hence why the disease ravages both their people and their crops, but this is incorrect. You could even say that they are being quite ignorant. But Noland is the real ignorant one. If I have to keep saying ignorant this much, I have to get silly with it. In his ignorance, when Noland cut down the snake, he wasn't aware that to the Shandorians, Kashi here is a god that was just about to get a tasty new sacrifice. And I used to have a snake, so I know how pissed little old Larry would have been if I was just about to give him a fresh mouse and then I cut his head off. Snakes are picky like that. So while Noland may have been saving an innocent person in his mind, to the village people, he's the one that just sentenced them all to death. Noland, however, is able to save the lives of himself, his crew, and literally every Shandorian when he convinces Great Warrior Kalgara to not stab him in the face while he's trapped in a landslide. While Kalgara is not the leader of the Shandorians, he is second in command and highly respected. The chief may be in charge of the village, but Kalgara is seen as the protector of their people, and they trust him to do away with any threats to the tribe. And god does he fucking want to do away with Noland. He is itching to skin this little white boy. But in a gorgeous, nail-biting scene at sunset, Kalgara has to reconcile with the fact that if he kills Noland or lets him die now, there is a very real chance that his entire people will die out. So with tears in his eyes, Kalgara has to end the life of one of the gods of his land to hopefully spare his people. Over the coming days, Noland teaches Kalgara about the natural world, while Kalgara shows Noland how their people live and worship the land. This blossoming friendship, built from a mutual understanding and respect for each other's worlds, reaches a beautiful high point when they meet Nola, a juvenile snake. Kalgara is able to see that this god is just like any other creature, including themselves, and is also just so fucking adorable, oh my god. Noland and his crew are even welcome to witness the City of Gold that rests just beneath Shandora, and are welcome to hear the toll of a massive golden bell. This bell calls out to Shandorians who have passed on and brings them home to spend the rest of eternity with their people. It is the fire of Shandora. It's the bell that Noland heard that called him to the island, just as it did Luffy a mere 400 years later in the grand scope of the One Piece world. But the friendship between Noland's crew and the Shandorians takes a bitter turn for all the wrong reasons. Hey everyone, real quick I just wanted to stop in and ask you to leave a comment about your favorite thing about SKYPIEA, or One Piece in general. I'll be sure to give you a reply. But let's get back to the video. In an effort to save the people of Shandora, Noland, as a matter of course, chops down a clearing of trees that have all been infected by the deadly fever. But for the last time, Noland messed with what he didn't know and earned the cold shoulder of the village and even the hatred of his great friend Kalgara. The trees Noland and his entire crew cut down were the kindling for the fire of Shandora. While the bell would call the lost souls of their people back home, the trees are where they would rest. But in the dim light of morning on the sea, Kalgara calls out to Noland while they leave, telling him to come back someday, as he now knows that that's how he saved their lives. Noland feels a great weight lift off his shoulders as his friend welcomes him to come back anytime, and Kalgara sees the gold left on the beach that they happily gave to the brave pirates to thank them for what they had done. The story of Noland the Liar and Great Warrior Kalgara is a beautiful tale of two peoples coming together, but it's what Oda does with this foundation 400 years later that really sends it through the clouds. The insane seas of the Grand Line eventually rip Shandora from its foundation from the earth and launch it into the sky. The Golden Bell, the fire of Shandora, being ripped from the people who forged its song. Kalgara being given the Stairway to Heaven and Noland the Highway to Hell means their friendship gets no encore. But in the 400 years since, it does get a remix.
Oh, the islands in the south are warm, and their heads get really hot. They grow pineapples, they grow coconuts, and they're morons!
I love this series, and one of the biggest signature marks for One Piece so far in my journey with it is these grand stories of the scales of history that might repeat or play back on themselves even 400 years later and come out with a different outcome. Noland and Luffy both were called to the fire of Shandora by the tolling of the bell. Kalgara and his descendant Viper are both immediately hostile to their new allies, but for completely valid reasons. We see that the Shandorians 400 years ago didn't even have a moment to catch their breath before they were set upon by their new Parakupa colonizers. But luckily, this time around, their enemy isn't anything as elusive as a deadly disease. It's a psychopathic, lightning-wielding despot who also looks like Eminem.
I hear what you say. Hippity hoopla!
Okay, God Eneru, okay, we see you. While the Shandorians and the Straw Hats come to blows more than once, this time there is no tragic misunderstanding to tear them apart from each other. And that is bad fucking news for one guy. The Straw Hat crew and the Shandorians don't have much reason to be friendly with each other. The Straw Hats openly want gold from their city, and the Shandorians have had enough of outsiders. But luckily they light the fire of Shandora and let the bell ring again together. The Shandorians are obviously based on our own Native Americans, a whole ocean away from Oda, but I think he did a fantastic job telling a tale that really paid respect to how awful what we did to their people and culture truly was. Even the story from 400 years ago and the Straw Hat crew now reflect on each other in incredible ways that make it exceptionally rewarding to rewatch. While last time Noland's crew willingly left behind the treasure they had been gifted, the Straw Hats steal as much gold as they can carry, or so they think, while the Shandorians try to give them more than they could ever fit on the ship. While Noland introduced the Shandorians to more advanced medicine, this time the Shandorians introduce our Blue Sea sailors to dials. Little shells that can be programmed to shoot fire, blow wind, store flavor, you name it. Usopp in return gives them a rubber band, which is a band of rubber. But the most satisfying Ouroboros from this beautiful parallel story had to be the snake Nola. Once a baby who loved to hear the ring of the bell, now a massive serpent, Kalgara calls to Noland from the afterlife, from the great fire of Shandora, to ring the bell for him again, to ring it loud enough so that the ends of the earth can hear it, and they can bring their friend home. The story of Noland the Liar and Great Warrior Kalgara was not only beautiful and special in his own right, but Oda completely redefined it when he put it on top of this saga that he had already been telling for nearly 200 episodes by this point. It is a wonderful story, and I recommend anyone to check it out. But that is the video for this week, y'all. I will see you next time. Goodbye. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching that video. If you made it to this point in the video, a special double thank you to you. I love the tale of Great Warrior Kalgara and Noland the Liar, but Oda, let's start giving people names that are easier to read when we're doing voiceover. Your next character, his name's gonna be John. Real easy. But anyways, we'll have to show off for my collection this week. We are taking a break from girlfriend birthday time, and we are doing Minion Mug. This is the mug that I spit into when my mouth gets a little crowded with spit while I'm doing voiceover. See, I'm not lying. I'll see y'all next week. Goodbye.